Welcome, Cris Barrish. I have wanted to speak with you about media during COVID. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I go to the office every day, and my two colleagues in Wilmington work from home. So I'm safe here, and I can get out and about when I need to for a story with masks and long poles if
Sure.
necessary. And I have my recording equipment here for radio. So it works out better for me to come in and have my space and get it done.
Sure. Well, Cris, before we talk about media during COVID, let's do a little backstory or a biopic. Uh, Talk about your upbringing. It really parallels mine. We both grew up in a state with the morning news and evening journal. Those were the sources of information for us because we only had Philadelphia television for all intents and purposes. So how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to journalism.
Well, okay, well, it's a little unconventional, but I grew up in Arden, and my parents were hairdressers, and I loved baseball. So I decided I was going to be a baseball player, which was foolish because I didn't have the talent. But I really loved to read the newspaper for the baseball statistics, the baseball roundups. I was in 9, 10. It was during the Vietnam War, so I'd catch a little bit about that. But I really started following the paper and reporting through Sport Magazine and Sports Illustrated because of my love for baseball. So when I realized couldn't be a baseball player, although I was okay, I decided maybe I could be a baseball writer. And I went to St. Mark's High School, and math was really my real academic talent. But I liked to write a little bit. I'd won a couple writing contests like in grade school, and there was a little bit of skill there. So when I went to college, I went to UD, and I stayed local, and I majored at first in accounting because to me that would be a good career for me. But I didn't like it that much, and then I switched to English as a junior, and I flubbed around a little bit with Shakespeare and and great English writers. But there were 3 concentrations: journalism, folklore, and literature. And I'd worked for the Ultramark at St. Mark's. I was their sports editor, but only had a couple editions.
That is a great school. They turned out a lot of cool people. Was John Carney in your class?
He was. No, he was 3 years older. His brother Mike was in my class, and we all went to Holy Rosary together in Claymont. So I've known their family ever since I was kindergartner. And his brother Mike is one of my best friends still. And I see John, and I write about John, so I have to sort of walk that line of impartiality and
So
objectivity.
when you came out of college, we're in the same sphere pretty much. Those were the days. Let's see, Bill Frank was probably still there. Norm Lockman, John Taylor, all of the lions in journalism locally were still there, and the paper was so important. Did they pick you up as a cub reporter?
I went in as a news assistant in the sports department. My professor at UD was Dennis Jackson. He knew I liked sports, and I was about to graduate. I hadn't really worked for the Review at all. I had written a couple articles.
I did. I worked for the Review.
I said I was a little unconventional, and actually I thought about going in the Air Force, and I go as a college graduate, and maybe I could use my math skills somehow, or be a pilot. I had no real plan. But this one professor knew I liked sports, and he wrote me a nice letter, and I started working in the sports department there as a news assistant, covering high school, local sports, and at night taking all the results. At that time, the sports department was almost as big as the whole paper today. It
I
was just
believe it.
amazing. There were 10 of us that worked at night on the desk taking all the high school scores, and it was a real vibrant sports department. And we had a guy that covered the Phillies, a guy that covered the Sixers, a guy that covered the Eagles and traveled with them, the Flyers, University of Delaware, golf. It was huge. So I just became one of the young staff trying to work their way up, and my goal was to cover the Phillies. but it was amazing. I mean, they were all there. Fred Comegys was the superstar photographer, and there were
Oh,
4 or 5
sure,
other great photographers. Pat Crow
sure.
was there. It was just amazing, all the talent there, and a lot of people, people came through, and some moved up to the Inquirer or to the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. Some frittered out, but it was like I think I looked once, it was like the 90th biggest paper in the country. And we
And
covered a whole state, so I loved it. I
and
really,
kids today, not kids today, God, I sound like an oldie. People today under a certain age have no idea what it took to put out 2 full newspapers every day. The morning news, the evening journal, every day, statewide, even in a small state like Delaware, because everything today is so instant and digital. These are short interviews. Let's talk about that. How's the transition been?
well, the transition began while I was at the newspaper, and in probably around, I don't know, 2009, 2010. Well, first of all, late 90s, during the time of the Capano case, when, I mean, we covered that thing with 3 or 4, like debacle with 3 or 4 reporters, a couple of us almost full time.
And subsequently, you wrote a book about it, I know.
I did. But we had at that time, I believe, 140 people statewide in the newsroom. That was a bureau in Sussex County, Georgetown. We was staffed with 4 or 5 full-time. We had a Dover bureau. At one time, we even had a bureau in Bear. We had one in Elkton. It was thriving, and we were news assistants, there were librarians. It was just real, and we covered the whole state, and we were a force. I mean, we covered everything. We had community section, and it was really vibrant. And somehow I worked my way up to be their chief investigative reporter. I think just from tenacity, whatever. A couple good breaks and a couple stories we did. But by like 2008, 2009, they just started cutting back. The internet came up, and Craigslist advertising, and advertising shrunk, and the company wanted to keep its profits up. So it was like this.
Sure.
By 2015, I was the chief investigative reporter still, but we had to reapply for our jobs, and that was really just
Wow.
humiliating almost. And there were a handful of us that were veterans who just,
So you made the leap to WHYY, and they were, I'll say it, continually looking for the right foothold in the state. They had a full newsroom in the Fifth and Scott days, and, that was long gone. All these forces were converging. So here we are in the digital world, where you can every second find out something new. How do you find the truth, Cris?
Well, I bring the same principles I always have. Try to get the facts, interview if it's if it's a political issue or a social justice, whatever the issue is, try to find the people on either side of it and in the middle, and try to find some objective facts to anchor your story in. Right now, I mean, I'm not doing long investigative pieces like I did at the newspaper. I'm doing radio. And sometimes it would be a feature anywhere from 40 seconds to 5 minutes. It'll be a spot to 5 minutes. And that was a big transition. Learning how to work all the radio equipment, speak on air, read your lines. When I joined, we had a little show called First. It was a weekly news magazine. I had to learn how to read a teleprompter, worry about how my mouth moved on TV, try to, speak live, learn how to ask questions that sounded right to the audience rather than me grilling somebody. So that was a big transition. But look, it happened. It's happened over time. Anybody that's still in journalism knows, first thing to do, you want to get your story online. If it's breaking news, you do a short story, then you expand it to a longer story. The radio may come later. just depends. But you want to get the news out there fast, and there's a lot of mechanisms. You can use tools like Facebook and Twitter to find people to interview. So I've learned to make it work, but it's different. It really is different. It's you got to be fast.
So the issue today, though, Cris, is there is so much misinformation readily and easily available to people. Now, during COVID, which is why I started this little interview program here to, keep folks talking, how are people to determine the truth? People that don't go to sort of the bulwarks, the traditional New York Times, Washington Post, even if they're reading other, I don't know, let's say more traditional news sources, there are literally tens, if not hundreds, of options for finding what you want to hear, not necessarily the truth.
Well, that's that's true, and that's a challenge. I mean, for readers and viewers and listeners and journalists. I mean, like I'll put up, especially during when COVID started, I'm trying to cover it, and I'm going to food bank distribution. I'm going to testing sites, interviewing restaurant owners. I'm looking at the state stats. I'm looking at the national stats, and I'm trying to report on it. And every story I'd post on my social media, and I would get feedback that was it was baffling, that this isn't real, testing doesn't work, it's all fake, you're fake. I mean, I literally, I've probably blocked an average of 3 people a day during that time because they just spew such false information. And now if I'm a viewer or a listener, I mean, I did a story on fake news for First, and I went to UD, and there were a couple speakers, talking about fake news. And I interviewed a college kid. I said, what do you do? He goes, well, what I do is I try to read things from a left perspective, from a right perspective, and try to figure out the truth myself. And that's no way to do things. You want to hear both perspectives, but you want to try to anchor it in facts, but I'll go to the CDC site, and no one believes that anymore. Trump really did a number on objective truth, and it's going to take a while to recover from that.
It's a far cry from being a little girl sitting with my parents watching Walter Cronkite, every night, and knowing that that was the story, Cris, where do you see yourself headed?
Well, I'm up there in age. I joke with my girlfriend that I've been around for 200 years, but
you're a lot younger than the president.
Well, I don't know. For one thing we do at WHYY, we do periodic documentaries. And we've done 2 here in Wilmington last year. One was on Wilmington trying to reinvigorate itself while it deals with devastating gun violence. And the other one was about education in Wilmington, anchored around the fact that there's no public high school in Wilmington. And I've really found that I enjoyed that a lot.
Good.
Because it's it's long form journalism, but it's on the screen, and I've learned how to work with cameramen and video editors, and work with Mark Eichman, who's just brilliant at putting together music and whatever. So we've done 2 of these half-hour documentaries, and we won regional news Emmys. And I see you've got a couple on your and I was going to bring them today, and I forgot them. But I found that I enjoy that a lot. Good. I mean, I like the whole process of gathering, not having to do the story that day, and then think about it. And that's what I did at the newspaper. I would gather, sometimes work 4 or 5 months on something before I published anything. But when I did, I synthesized it so well, and I understood it so well that I could really present it. And I really like that. So anybody's watching, when my full-time working days are done, I wouldn't mind going into the documentary business. So I enjoy watching them, sports documentaries, news documentaries.
Tough game, buddy, when you got to raise the money, though, I'll tell you that.
Exactly. Now people tell me, why don't you do your own podcast? And I'm like, well, wait a minute. That's someone's got to pay for it. And
Yeah.
I like to work and I like to have health benefits, and WHYY provides that the venue for me. And I've gotten a lot of great training here.
Sure.
So I've no plans on going anywhere for now, but down the road, when I do sort of decide not to work full time, I'd like to make that my avocation.
Well, stand by when we finish. I want to talk to you for a second, but keep up the good work, keep them honest, keep them straight, and keep the focus on Delaware, huh?
Thank you so much. I will.
All right, Cris. Talk soon. Bye-bye now.